It's time for our class to begin. If you have your Bibles, please turn to Acts the 23rd chapter. Last Wednesday evening, we dealt quite a bit with the striking of the mouth. And why would you think he would strike the mouth? And it's because he blasphemed by saying that he lived before God with all good conscience. And we see how that unfolded. We had questions about the resurrection, existence of angels. That's later. That's in this same chapter, but it's after these verses when Ananias told someone to strike him on the mouth. He's saying something. I've lived with all good conscience and before God. And of course, we didn't go a lot of history about Ananias, but he was a very corrupt man. He was insolent. He was one that was greedy. In 52 AD, he's been sent to Claudius Caesar because the Samaritans said that he was treating them not right. Of course, the Jews like that, and so the Jews were right there with him. But he was apparently was able to come back to Jerusalem, and but he was one that was real quick and reacting, and this fits with his character. Josephus says that about Ananias, and so there was a sense that he reacted that way. But what happens when Paul says, "You smitest thou me, and you to judge me according to the law, and commandest me to be smitten contrary to the law." We've seen that if you're a Roman, we saw Paul appealing to the centurion about the Roman citizenship. But here's the Jewish part of it that I think Paul is dealing with as well among the Sanhedrin. It wasn't the fact that the Romans were scourging him, but to smite him before he has a chance to defend himself. What did Nicodemus say in John 7:51? Does not our law, we're not going to go along against a man except he first be able to say what you're going to accuse him for. Paul has not been able to speak. He just shuts him up because you're supposed to at least hear from him before you accuse him. John 7:51. That's Jewish law. And that's why Ananias, you're there as one that's a high priest. Of course, we realize when Jesus was involved, you had Caiaphas, yes, who was there, and there was the father-in-law to Caiaphas, and he was the one that they would have appealed to. So you had a double of those, but this is Ananias that came on the scene, and he'd already been a prisoner of Rome because the Samaritans accused him of not being fair with them, but he got to come back, and here he's with them treating Paul this way. So to smite him on the mouth, why would you do that? Because he said something. And what he had just said, I live before God in all good conscience unto this day. Paul will come back to that same point and say it again when he's defending himself before we'll get for Felix and Festus and Agrippa as we look at the next few chapters about him being in Caesarea. So we didn't get to define much about Ananias, and I wanted just to talk about judge according to the law. You're wanting that, but you're going to be contrary to the law, and part of that would be the law that the Jews were under. That we still, just like they just said that, hey, Jesus, let Jesus talk. Why do you condemn him for he speaks? Why do you condemn Paul for he speaks? So we talked about that. So I think that's the point of he claimed part B, number 2. Why did he call Ananias a whited wall? Because he was a hypocrite. He said we're going to do it by the law, and he told him to smite him contrary to the law. That would be the Jewish law. We talked about what our attitude should be toward our nation's rulers. We ought to respect them. Acts 22:28, we're not going to speak evil of the ruler of my people in the context of reviling God. You're not going to speak against God, nor the people who rule. And so we set that forth. He divides the crowd, Sadducees and Pharisees. What did the Sadducees believe? Yeah, well, they didn't believe with it. No resurrection, nor is there any spirit or angel. And we'll find that, hey, the Pharisees come along and say, we don't find anything wrong with this man. What if he had a spirit or an angel spoke to him? So I think the spirit could be someone that's a spirit world, but it may not be one sent by God as an angel. And but the Sadducees did not believe that. So Paul, he perceived that. He said some were Sadducees, some Pharisees. So he perceived that, and then he divides them. And Pharisees are on his side. That will become very important in Caesarea when the fact is that he challenges the people who are accused him to speak about what he did wrong. Because when I was there in Jerusalem, Pharisees said they saw nothing wrong with me. And he'll come back at that. We get to that. So we'll get to there in a few moments. What encouragement did Paul receive from the Lord? Kind of hit this at the last as we get into middle part of chapter 23. What does verse 12 say? As thou hast testified concerning me at where? Jerusalem, that's where we are. Where are you going to bear witness to me, the Lord says? He's going to be at Rome, and we know he'll get there. And so there's a sense Jerusalem is not going to be the end of your walk, Paul. It's we've got some more work to be done, and you will be testifying concerning me. And so there's the sense of the Lord. I don't think that's God the Father. I think it's Jesus Christ the Lord. You're going to be bear witness also at Rome concerning me, and that's about Jesus Christ. He saw him on the road to Damascus, heard a voice from him, knows what his mission is going to be. He told him to get out of Jerusalem. They're not going to accept that testimony. And now he says, you're going to be in Rome. And I'm sure that was just, he's telling him, be of good cheer. And it's interesting, you could be of good cheer and you could be treated so shamefully by your fellow Jews and the Romans as well, and yet be of good cheer because you're going to bear testimony to me in Rome. And how's that going to be? That's going to be as a prisoner as well, though the situations may not be as bad. But he's going to be incarcerated quite a bit after these events in Jerusalem, and they're already unfolding. What conspiracy, and that's what we start with this evening, beginning with verse 12, what conspiracy was formed against Paul and who all were involved? So what is the conspiracy? Yeah, there's about over 40, there's more than 40 that have put themselves to an oath and therefore a curse if they don't follow through. They will neither eat nor will they what? Drink. Can't have your water, and I just won't have food today. I'll just, no water, no drink. Until Paul is killed. That's what they put themselves under. And that was going to be important to them because they have to do away with Paul. And that was something they're going to have to deal with. So you say, well, you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, who overheard this plan? Because we're going to see how that was thwarted. Who overheard this plan, and then the ball gets rolling to protect Paul? His nephew, that's right. His sister's son. Is he a young man? Twice he said, you take the young man. Paul, again, working through his centurions, you take this young man, and he has something to say to the chief captain. He has something to say to him. Didn't tell him all the details, but Paul knew what he had to say, but he just tell him. So it's just kind of interesting, probably a young man, because when the chief captain takes him by the hand and asks him, it's like he was kind of tender toward a younger person and wants to know what's taking place. And so that's when the young man, the nephew, says they're going to try to get you, Claudius Lysias, the chief captain, to bring him down to the Sanhedrin court for further judgment or trying to further examination of him. And what their plan was, when they bring him down, that's when their plot was to kill him and to put him to death. And I said to the nephew, you cannot let that happen. You cannot let that happen. That's not going to take place. You can't allow that. And so the chief captain, being honorable as he is, said, don't you tell anybody. And so what was the plan? From his standpoint, we know what their plan is. Get the chief captain to bring him down and that sort of thing. But what was his plan now? You got soldiers. He has 2 centurions, so how many soldiers does he have? He had 200. He has 70 horsemen. And he has 200 spearmen. How far were the 200 soldiers to go on this trip? To Caesarea. The horsemen, as they will get to a city, and we'll just talk about that in a few minutes, they left and went back to the barracks, back to Jerusalem. Was that enough then to deal? You're looking at 50 some odd miles away from Caesarea to Jerusalem, and you're going to third watch of the night after sun went down. You'd be traveling all night. You get there, and the next day would be there, and that's when the horsemen could leave. So if the plot was going to be between where they're going to stop before they get to Caesarea, did they have plenty of power to thwart over 40 men? He made sure of that, didn't he? Got 70 horsemen. And you have over 40, but they're on horseback, and Paul's going to get a horse. He gets a beast to ride on, and he's supposed to take him there. And then when they got there, the horsemen come back to Jerusalem, and the soldiers there are going to take him on in. So they had plenty of there, but when you get further and further away from Jerusalem, you're probably not going to have that threat. So that was the way it went down, and Paul was indeed protected. So here was this conspiracy. We know it was in place. 2 years later, they're still wanting to kill kill Paul. 2 years later, after he's going Caesarea and going back to Jerusalem. It's where they wanted to come back to. They're still wanting to kill Paul. Let's kill the messenger that's bringing the truth of the gospel. Paul says, Lord, they know I was one that persecuted the Christians from the beginning. They're not going to listen to you. And they say, well, away with him. Ananias shuts his mouth. How dare you sit there? You've lived before God in all good conscience. Which side of the road are you on? You've been a Christian, and now you've been a Jew, and you've been able to you killed Christians, and now you're one of them, and you seem like you're all over the place. And that made Ananias very, very mad. Paul did not know Ananias was the high priest there at that time. Apparently, he's different from the one in which when he was a Jew, he received the letters from the high priest to go capture the Christians and bring them back. So we have a different high priest, or he would have known who that was. But this was different. He's commanding somebody to smite him. He did not know, and he said, you should not do that. So, but this plan is there in order to do that. Now, my question, I use this as an example of God's providence. Is that correct or not? Is that a good example of God's providence? It's not miraculous. It's providential. We talk about, there's people say anything God does and interacting in something that has to be miraculous. He said, Paul, you're going to be seeing me in Rome. That's before this conspiracy we're reading about. He's already determined he's going to be in Rome. God has a plan. What miracle was done that thwarted that plan? I don't see it, but there was a plan. And it worked. Horsemen, it just so happened, who's overhearing overhearing the little plan, a little nephew, a nephew. Isn't that ironic? That's just full of irony, all right? The way God does things to bring about His will. And we have examples of that through the Bible, that God provides for us. He's leading us forward. He gives us our daily bread. Is that miraculous? And yet people say, well, He can't operate today unless he does a miracle. And I just think they need to see a distinction between God working, and He can work through medicine. We can pray to God that someone be healed, and He can work through medicine and the wisdom of doctors. He could bring those things to bear and said, hey, this is what is needed at this time. Mixing different types of antibiotics to take care of a special problem of pneumonia. They can do that. Is that miraculous? And but it's just using things that we have, and God can put those pieces together. David? Yeah. That's ironic, isn't it? No, that's a good one. And that's the one that says, it's not karma, what goes around comes around. But it's God saying, using things that people have to destroy someone, they destroy themselves. Both will fall in the pit sometime. You make one. But no, that's a great one. There wasn't a miraculous thing there, but God turned things around, didn't He? You do that. So we need to have a faith in God that it's going to take a miracle for that person to get over this or that. And we're not asking for miracles, but we can pray to God that things will work out, if it be that will, for someone to live in our modern world of medicine. But this conspiracy was thwarted, and that's a good thing for Paul. Other than getting Paul out of town, what reason was there for sending Paul to Felix? So here we come down to verse numbers 26. We know who the chief captain's name is because he's writing a letter, and he's writing it to the governor, Felix. Claudius Lysias, unto the most excellent governor Felix. Greeting. As I read this, is this accurate? Is this the way we've been reading it? This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be slain of them, whom I came unto them with the soldiers and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman. And desiring to know the cause wherewith they accused him, I brought him down unto their council. We said, well, all that's happened. He leaves out behind that was getting ready to scourge him and examine him, and he's a Roman citizen. No, he was a Roman, and we won't talk about that in his letter. Don't blame him. Whom I found to be accused about questions of their law, but to have nothing laid to his charge worthy of death or bonds. And when it was shown me that there would be a plot against the man, and wouldn't you like to tell him all the details? Let me tell you what happened. So Paul's nephew heard this, and he got word of that, and I planned all this. I kind of admired the guy for not going all the details, but when it was shown to me that there was a plot against the man, I sent him to thee forthwith. And I had to get 70 horsemen, and I had to get down 200 this and 200 that. He didn't talk about that. He just got the job done. And so I got the plot against the man. I sent him to therewith, charging his accusers also to speak against him before thee. So getting him safely out of town was one of his things. What's his other reason? We just read it. What is it? Accusers come down to Caesarea to Felix. You accusers come. He just wants things to be done correctly, according to law. Paul hasn't done anything worthy of death as far as he's concerned. And you accusers did. So here's a letter that's coming, and for his accusers to come before thee. So Felix should be prepared for that. And so it was safely getting him out of town, mission accomplished. Because he's going to be there. And now it was time that Felix can investigate him. Because he's done all he can. He saved him from being killed. I think everything he says in that letter is correct, from what we've seen from the scriptures. And he doesn't go in and brags on himself, or he doesn't accuse himself either. He doesn't talk about missteps. He doesn't talk about all the details he has. And I just think it's interesting when he writes the letter, it wasn't a lot of details that we've looked at. And but I think he saved Paul. Paul is going to be saved, and he's going to be in Rome. And that's, God uses men to accomplish that. Any questions or comments there? That's another reason for him sending Felix. So Paul left Jerusalem. We have the third hour of the night, watch of the night. It's under darkness. So where did he stay the night? What place? Was it? Did he make it all the way to Caesarea? Was it Lydda? Antipatris? Yeah. That was a city built by Herod the Great and named after his father, Antipater. And depending on which book you read, it's between 35 and 42 miles away from Jerusalem, 26 miles away from Caesarea. It's kind of a in-between place. And that's where they go that night. They came by night to Antipatris, and on the morrow they left, and the horsemen to go with them returned to the castle. So the horsemen with him. I don't think there'll be any problems between the next 26 miles. We're way away from Jerusalem. And he was right, because we have 200. They got around above 40. We got 200, and maybe the 200 spearmen went with them. You get that impression. It just looks like the horsemen went back. So let's save the horses. It's don't hurt them too much, and the mission could be accomplished. So that's the place. It's a real place that he was at, and they spent the night there. Some authors said if they left, that they could be there at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's daylight. They could be, and they're strong enough to deal with anything that might come at that particular time. And so that was the plan. I think it's a great plan. So if you're going to counter that, you might want to have guys placed down the road when the horsemen leave. And you might, if you got word, hey, they may have 400 guys, you might want to get a little bit more than 40. But those people had vowed themselves not to eat or drink. I don't know if they did that for 2 years or not, or did they come off of that? Because I don't think you live, you did that wrong. But it shows you how angry they are. They're going to still go after him, and they are trying to accomplish that. Whose castle did they stay in Caesarea? Herod. Now, when we talk about castle, it could be a praetorium, and really it could just be, it's where the army is, the barracks. We've seen castle used in some of our translations to talk about in Jerusalem, and really that's just where the army was, and the barracks were there. But this praetorium, this castle, this was a place where the governors from Jerusalem would come to Caesarea to give judgment. It's a place where judgment is going to be set forth. We think, well, it's just a resort place that Herod built for himself and his family. It's really not exactly that, even though it might be called a castle and a praetorium, but it's the idea of where the armies are located. Praetorium Guard. They could be just like, that's where the barracks are, where the army is there. But that's where they would stay, and they would offer up their judgment as they would go into that province. And knowing Paul was, as we'll see as chapter 24 opens, knowing that Paul is there from the region of Cilicia, and let's read verse 34. When he had read that letter, he asked what province he was, and he said he understood that he was of Cilicia, so I will hear thee fully. That was a place he had jurisdiction over, Paul being from there. And so when he says, I will hear thee fully, said he, when thy accuser also are come. And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's palace. He's going to be under guard, and that's where he'll be. So that's how chapter 23 ends. Any questions on anything we've looked at there? We looked at some of the details, but now we see things being changed. And who comes? You got Ananias coming on this occasion. Identify these, Tertullus, and especially we're going to see him at the beginning. So who is he? David? Yeah, you think attorney was an orator, and he's one therefore could speak well, but he's coming to be the prosecuting attorney, right? He's going to take the place of the Jews. Who comes with him? The high priest at this time, Ananias. He's coming down with certain elders and with an orator, one Tertullus, and they informed the governor, against Paul. So there's your prosecution. So you got the high priest who wants to shut him up. You got some Jews there that they're going to be involved, and we're going to see there's somebody missing, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. But he began to accuse him, saying, so this is where we'll get into him. Now, who's Drusilla that will come in this chapter 24? Who is that a she or a he? It's a feminine name. It's Drusilla. And so she is important to this story in what way? Who's she married to? Felix. And she's not a very good character either in history, but she was married to him. Kind of worked out. We'll see Bernice, another one. Their marriage was indeed wrong, but here was their marriage, and it was one that they weren't faithful for their partners are concerned. But we'll talk more about that event as it unfolds in our text. But here first is Tertullus speaking about the things that against Paul that he sets forth. So he makes these charges, and I just want us to see how Paul, as he will speak forth, and beginning with verse 10, he's allowed to speak. So we're going to shut his mouth up. You're going to do it, but Paul will answer these and see if we can pick up how he does it. Let's see the accusations. We're in a courtroom. And all of a sudden now, you've got Felix, you're going to examine him. This is an opportunity to find out just how bad he is. Seeing that by thee we enjoy much peace, and that by thy providence evils are corrected for this nation. For we accepted in all ways and in all places most excellent Felix with all thankfulness. Does he know how to start a speech or what? Does he know how to direct his attention? He's better than Felix. This guy has got it. He knows he's your lawyer. But that I be not further tedious unto thee. Just don't want to take too much of your time. Your clemency was be appreciated. I will entreat thee to hear us of thy clemency a few words. For we have found this man, what is he? Some of your words have plague, right? He's a plague. Have you ever called anybody a pest? That's our word. You're a pest. He's a plague. No, he's a pestilent fellow. He's a pest. He's bugging us all the time, and we're not going to get. We've got an oath, and we're going to kill him, and we're going to get rid of him. But he was a pestilent fellow, a mover of insurrections. We've heard that insurrection. We've heard that in our country, attributed to people. What is an insurrection? Yeah, you're overcoming things. You're causing the chaos and overthrowing things, overthrowing governments and overthrowing order that's there in the country. He's a mover of that. Among all the Jews throughout the world, I always wonder, when you kind of go that direction, you probably went too far. But he's just everywhere. It's the idea that insurrection. Let's overthrow this. Let's overthrow that. And he's a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. And so let's see how does Paul deal with that in his remarks. When he says he's a pestilent fellow who is a mover of insurrection among the Jews, let's see Paul as he starts in verse 10. And when the governor had beckoned to him to speak, Paul answered. Now I'd be looking over Ananias and say, see, he lets me speak and you wouldn't. That's just trying to get even. That's not good either. But Paul gets to speak. We're glad to hear him. For as much as I know that thou hast been many years a judge unto this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. He knows how to open the argument with the figures as well. Seeing that thou canst take knowledge that it is not more than 12 days. So here we have a time frame here, 12 days since I went up to worship at Jerusalem. And that's what we're seeing here. So chapter 24, after 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down. So it's been a week plus. It hadn't been that long since he first came into Jerusalem. So he's going to make his defense here. It says, and neither in the temple did they find me disputing with any man or stirring up a crowd, whether they're in the synagogues or in the city. He's a pestilent fellow and a mover of insurrection among the Jews. Where were they located? Well, in the city. Paul said, I didn't do it in the city. Synagogue. Didn't do it in the synagogue. The temple. He did nothing like that. And I think he's taken care of being such a pest. He wasn't disputing with any man. Remember, he had purified himself so he could give the idea of purifying for the benefit of those men, and therefore they could be offered a sacrifice and be ceremonially clean again under Jewish law. And so he's not guilty of that. Neither can they prove to thee the things whereof they now accuse me. That's what's needed, proof. Now, who was it, and see if we've been paying attention to our reading, who was it that brought these accusations against him to begin with? Were they Jews from Jerusalem? Or were they from Asia Minor? There's a lot of difference. There were Jews from Asia Minor, and remember, there's Gentiles that come down with Paul. Remember, they came from churches bringing money to help the needy Jews into Jerusalem. And they had come down, and they just happened to see, well, there's the company of Paul, and they made this thing up. And they defiling the temple, bringing the Gentiles into the temple. Well, the Gentiles had a place to be in the temple grounds. They said he did that to the temple. So I think he's answering that. What about the ringleader sect of the Nazarenes? How does he deal with that? He didn't profane the temple at all. But this idea of a ringleader, how does he deal with that one? What does verse 14 tell us? But this I confess unto thee, that after the way which they call what? Sect of the Nazarenes. That's just a sect. People can demean people. We're Christians. And it is the way. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And thank you. And we're going by, he's the one. They don't honor that. They won't say this is really what, they just say he's a sect of the Nazarenes because Jesus came out of Nazareth. And it's just a sect. And Paul he absorbs it. He takes it. What they call that is really an opportunity for him to tell him about Jesus, about the way which they call it. I serve, the God of our fathers, believing all things which are according to the law. So I'm not here being against the law. I didn't defile the temple. There's no evidence for that. You can't prove that. But what had accusations done? It stirred up the people to want to kill him. They even get them riled up to say, we're going to have an oath and put ourselves under an oath, a solemn oath, that we'll not eat or drink till we kill him. Make the plan to kill him. All the events that happened, it came by just someone wanting to stir up the crowd. And can that happen real easily? Yeah, it can happen. And it does all the time. But Paul did not dispute with any men. There's not any evidence for that. But they had it going this way. And so we're trying to get it unraveled. He said, but I believe all things according to the law which are written and the prophets, having hope toward God. So he has an opportunity now to deal with he knows the Sanhedrin has Sadducees and Pharisees, a lot of Pharisees. But he said, also themselves look for that there shall be a resurrection, both of what? This is a great passage for us to know. That a resurrection, one resurrection, and who's going to be resurrected? Yeah, just Christians. Just going to be resurrected. The just, there's your Christian, but also who's also going to be resurrected at the same time? The just and the unjust. There's only one resurrection. There's not 8 of them. There's not. That's just one. And the end of time, it won't be just some got resurrected and they went off somewhere to heaven and came back a little bit later for the judgment to come upon the others. It's one resurrection, just, unjust. John 5, Jesus talks about that. They'll all hear from the tombs to come forth from the tombs. Those who have done good, resurrection of life. Those who have done evil, wait a while, it'll be 7 years or 8 years and we'll get you to you. No, it's one resurrection. Just and the unjust, those who have done evil, those who have done good, and all will be raised. And we see Paul setting that forth. And so look at verse 16. Does he get a point across, Ananias? Herein I also exercise myself to have a conscience void of offense toward God and men always. And he is just now exalted what a belief that the Pharisees would have that the Sadducees denied. He has a hope of the resurrection. So I think he's doing he's doing a great job in defending himself and being able to bring in teaching that they all need to hear. Now, after some years, I come to bring alms to my nation. I wasn't here to cause an insurrection. I'm here to help needy Jews in the Lord's church, amidst which they found me purified in the temple with no crowd, nor yet with tumult. But there were certain Jews from Asia, and who's absent on this occasion? Who was absent from Caesarea that should have been there accusing Paul? Except, the eyewitnesses. They ought to be before thee and to make accusation. Are they here? I don't think so. They're not here. If they had aught against me. But he defends himself. He didn't profane the temple. He's not a pest. He's not a ringleader of the sect of Nazarenes. He's just he's one of the apostles that's working in the Lord's church. Or else let these men themselves say what wrongdoing they found. So here he puts a challenge. How does he challenge the high priest? Since they're not here, Ananias and you elders here, what wrongdoing did they find when I stood before the council? And this is where we go back. Remember the Pharisee stuff, we don't see anything wrong with him. What if an angel or spirit spoke to him? And just to fill out, we'll have to stop. Except to be for this one voice that I cried, standing among them, touching the resurrection of the dead, I'm called in question before you this day. Sadducees don't like that. Pharisees, we believe that. And he's making his case, I don't deserve to die. And that's already kind of being understood by the chief captain. And now Felix is going to get to know that. But what does Felix do? And we'll get into that next time. Is he just, well, this is it. It's not, we're going to release him. He kept him there and let another one take care of it because he kind of wanted to please the Jews. That's kind of politics. And we're going to see Paul 2 years later still in Caesarea. And sometimes I forget that. I say, well, he went to Caesarea and then he went to Rome. 2 years. That's a lot of time to be, he has some privileges, but it's still very difficult. Any comments you'd like to make before we before we end. We'll stop there, and we'll pick up after that, next chapter. Any comments you'd like to make, or something you want to add? Okay. Thank you for being here and participating.